Introduction to the Kingdom of Xandar. The Kingdom of Xandar, nestled in the heart of a fertile valley, was a land of peace and prosperity. The fields were rich with harvest, the rivers abundant with fish, and the people were happy under the just rule of King Zorek. The mighty king, known for his wisdom and strength, was loved by his subjects, and his reign brought an era of unmatched peace. However, the kingdom had been struck by tragedy. Queen Yara, beloved by all, passed away under mysterious circumstances, and the once vibrant palace now echoed with sorrow. Her death left the throne vacant, and King Zorek, though strong, became a broken man. He wandered through the grand halls of his palace with a heavy heart, unsure how to proceed. The once joyful and bustling palace was now eerily quiet, and the absence of his wife weighed heavily on the king. Without a queen, the kingdom's future seemed uncertain. The Council of Advisors warned King Zorek that he needed to remarry, for a kingdom without a queen would soon be vulnerable. A queen would bring strength to the throne, Your Majesty, they urged, their voices filled with concern. But the king refused. No woman can replace my beloved Yara, he would say, his voice tinged with grief. Yet, despite his resistance, the advisors persisted. The people of Xandar needed a queen, and the king's heart yearned to ease the weight of the emptiness beside him. The arrival of Lady Isha. One fateful evening, as the sun sank behind the distant mountains, a caravan arrived at the gates of the palace. The royal guards opened the gates cautiously, for travelers had not visited in days. From the caravan emerged a woman who, despite the dust and weariness of the road, seemed to glow with an otherworldly beauty. She was Lady Isha. Her skin was smooth as polished ebony, and her eyes shimmered like the moonlit waters of the kingdom's sacred river. Her long black hair cascaded like a river of silk down her back, and her presence seemed to command the very air around her. She moved with grace, as though every step was a dance, and her voice was like the sweetest melody. Your Majesty, Lady Isha bowed deeply before King Zorek, I seek refuge. My kingdom was destroyed, and I have nowhere else to turn. Her words were laced with a sorrow that mirrored the king's own grief, and her gaze was gentle yet piercing. She spoke of tragedy and loss, and something about her words resonated with the king's own heart. The king, though wary of strangers, found himself captivated by Lady Isha's presence. He was entranced by her beauty and the sadness that lingered in her eyes. Here, before him, stood a woman who had known loss, much like himself. The council, though hesitant, supported the idea of taking her in. Xandar had always been a place of refuge for those in need, and the people would welcome the noble woman. Princess Layla's suspicion. Princess Layla, the daughter of King Zorek, watched the events unfold with growing concern. Though she was young, she had inherited the sharp instincts of her late mother. She had always been able to sense when something was amiss, and as she observed Lady Isha from a distance, an uncomfortable feeling settled in her gut. There was something about Lady Isha that didn't sit right with her. The woman's beauty was almost too perfect, her charm too practiced. Every word she spoke seemed carefully measured, and her eyes, though beautiful, seemed to hold a secret. Layla, unable to shake her unease, spoke with her father. Father, there is something strange about this woman. I sense darkness in her eyes, and her story doesn't add up. King Zorek laughed softly, his eyes warm with affection for his daughter. Layla, you are just being protective. She has lost everything, just like I have. Let us show her the kindness of Xandar. But Layla's suspicions did not dissipate. As days passed, she watched Lady Isha with more scrutiny. Every moment the woman spent in the palace, Princess Layla grew more certain that Lady Isha was not who she claimed to be. King Zorek's decision. Despite his daughter's warnings, King Zorek found himself drawn to Lady Isha more and more. His heart, broken by the death of his beloved Queen Yara, seemed to find comfort in her presence. She was gentle with him, and her words soothed the wounds that had festered within him for so long. "Your Majesty, let us rebuild what has been lost," she said one evening as they sat alone in the garden. "Together, we can restore the strength of your kingdom, and together, we can heal your heart." Her words were like honey to his ears. The king had never imagined that he would find someone like her again. She seemed to understand him in a way no one else did. And though his advisors urged caution, King Zorek's loneliness and yearning for companionship clouded his judgment. "Prepare the wedding," he declared to his advisors the next day, his decision final. "I will marry Lady Isha. She will be the new queen of Zanda." The preparations for the grand wedding began. The kingdom rejoiced at the news, believing that their king had found the queen they had longed for. But Princess Layla could not shake the feeling that a great danger loomed, and the kingdom she loved was on the brink of disaster. She would not stop searching for the truth. Isha's transformation. In the quiet hours of the night, when the kingdom slept soundly beneath the glow of 1,000 stars, Lady Isha would retreat to her chambers. Her beauty, though captivating, hid a darker truth. Beneath the surface, she was no mere human woman, she was an ancient sorceress, a creature from the darkest depths of time. Each night, once the palace fell into silence, Lady Isha shed her human disguise. Her flawless skin peeled away, revealing a grotesque, monstrous form. Her once beautiful face twisted into a visage of nightmares. Her eyes, once shimmering with an almost ethereal glow, became hollow pits of darkness. Her once silky hair became matted, tangled with the decay of her true nature. Long, bony fingers twisted and elongated, and her body stretched and contorted into something that resembled a shadow more than a living being. She was known by many names in ancient times: the Wraith Queen, the Soul Devourer, a being who fed on the life force of others to sustain her beauty and power. Her true form, a terrifying creature of death, was far removed from the sweet, gentle lady that Zanda had welcomed into their kingdom. But to those who did not know the truth, Lady Isha was still a vision of elegance, her human form a carefully crafted illusion. The magic that bound her to the human world allowed her to live among the mortals, drawing upon their vitality and their fears to maintain her strength. Every night, she ventured into the hidden chambers beneath the palace, where secret rituals were performed. She called upon ancient, forbidden magic, her fingers weaving intricate symbols in the air. These spells bound the souls of the kingdom's villagers, stealing their life force and feeding it into her body. She grew stronger each night, but the magic came at a price. She needed King Zorek to weaken, to grow frail, for her true plans to come to fruition. King Zorek's decline. At first, the changes in King Zorek were subtle. He would wake from his slumber feeling more exhausted than he should. His once powerful frame, so strong and capable, began to tremble at times, his hands shaking as if they were no longer his own. His face became pale, and his once sharp eyes lost their luster. He grew weaker with each passing day, his health rapidly declining in a manner that made no sense. Lady Isha had her hand in all of it. Each night, she slipped a vial of poison into his wine, a slow-acting brew that weakened him bit by bit. The poison was not lethal at first, it simply drained his strength and made him more susceptible to her will. The people of the kingdom could not see the toll it took on their king, for Lady Isha's magic concealed the extent of his suffering. But in private, behind the closed doors of the royal chambers, King Zorek could feel himself slipping away. His advisors noticed, of course, but they were powerless to stop it. They begged the king to seek a healer, to allow the royal physicians to diagnose his ailment. But Zorek, dismissing their concerns, attributed his sickness to grief. "I am merely tired," he would say, his voice weary. "The loss of my queen still haunts me." What he did not know was that Lady Isha had been behind the illness from the very beginning. Her poison worked its magic, slowly claiming his vitality, as she whispered sweet words of comfort in his ear. But it wasn't just the poison. Isha performed dark rituals that drew upon the life force of those around her, particularly the vulnerable. Late at night, when the kingdom's villagers were fast asleep, she would send her minions to harvest the souls of the sick and the weak. These poor souls were consumed in secret, their life force absorbed by the dark queen to sustain her own unnatural beauty. The kingdom, oblivious to the danger lurking within its walls, carried on as if nothing had changed. The people mourned the loss of Queen Yara but thought little of their king's increasingly distant demeanor. Yet, the weight of the kingdom's suffering hung in the air, even if they could not see it. Princess Layla's growing fear. As King Zorek grew weaker, Princess Layla's suspicions only deepened. She had watched her father over the past few months, noting how his strength had waned. His once mighty presence had become fragile, and his hands, once steady and sure, now trembled as though they could no longer bear the weight of the crown. At first, Layla thought it might be the grief of losing her mother that was taking a toll on her father, but soon, she realized it was more than that. Her mother had passed, but King Zorek had not been this frail even in the darkest days of his mourning. Something far more sinister was at play. Late one night, when the moon was high in the sky, Layla sneaked into the royal chambers to check on her father. She found him asleep in his bed, his breathing shallow. A sense of dread filled her chest as she watched him, his body frail and unmoving. She could feel the darkness around him, an oppressive weight that seemed to seep from every corner of the room. As she stood over him, she noticed the goblet beside his bed, filled with wine that looked darker than it should have been. She knew her father never drank so much at night. Something was wrong. She carefully inspected the wine and found a faint trace of something, a powder, a residue that shouldn't have been there. Her heart sank. She knew it now, her father was being poisoned. But by whom? Princess Layla's mind raced. Could it be Lady Isha? She had been the one to introduce the wine to the king, offering it to him each evening under the guise of comfort. Isha's sweet words, her soft touch, and her beauty had all made her seem so innocent. But Layla now knew the truth. Isha's charm was nothing more than a carefully spun web, and at its heart was darkness. Desperate to save her father, Layla rushed to him, shaking him awake. "Father, you must stop drinking this wine. It is poisoned." King Zorek stirred but did not fully wake. He seemed confused, his thoughts clouded by the poison that had already begun to take its toll. "Layla, my child, I am simply tired. Just leave me be," he murmured weakly. Tears welled in Layla's eyes as she realized her father could no longer see what was right in front of him. Lady Isha's grip on him was tightening, and there was nothing Layla could do to stop it. Isha, meanwhile, continued her wicked rituals, growing stronger each day, while Zorek's decline became more pronounced. The kingdom, blinded by the illusion of peace, moved toward a fate none of them could yet imagine. The Dark Mirror. In the deepest chamber of the palace, hidden beneath layers of ancient stone, Lady Isha stood before the cursed mirror. The glass was dark, swirling with shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was no ordinary mirror. It was an artifact of immense power, capable of revealing glimpses of the future, or twisting the fate of those who dared look into it. Isha had used the mirror many times before, but tonight, she needed answers. Her plan to take the throne of Xanda was nearly complete, but something had changed. Princess Layla's presence had become a threat she could no longer ignore. The prophecy that had always haunted her lingered in her thoughts. The mirror would show her the path to victory, or so she hoped. As she gazed into the mirror, the glass rippled, the shadows swirling and thickening. Isha's eyes narrowed, her breath held in anticipation. The mirror began to clear, and a face appeared. But it was not her own. The face of Princess Layla stared back at her, glowing with an otherworldly power. The image of the young princess was crowned with light, and in her eyes burned the fire of destiny. Her gaze was unyielding, and she stood tall and proud, a true queen. The mirror spoke, its voice a low, eerie whisper. "When the king falls, the princess shall rise. She is the one who will claim the throne. Her power shall surpass even yours. A cold fury swept through Lady Isha as the prophecy played out before her. No. I will not let this child take what is mine. The mirror's words echoed in her mind, the cold certainty of the future pressing down on her. For centuries, she had feasted on the souls of powerful men, luring them into her web and feeding off their life force to maintain her beauty and power. But now, this girl, this mere child, threatened everything she had built. Isha's rage was palpable, her fist clenched in fury. I will not be undone by a girl. The prophecy was clear: if Layla lived, the throne would never be hers. She had to act before it was too late. Lady Isha's plot. In a fit of madness, Lady Isha made a decision. She would eliminate Princess Layla before the prophecy could come true. The princess had grown too powerful, too aware of the danger lurking in her kingdom. If Layla was allowed to live, the Red Queen's plans would fall apart. Isha called for her most trusted allies, the mercenaries, men who would do anything for gold. They were ruthless, skilled in the art of kidnapping and assassination. She paid them handsomely, promising them riches beyond their wildest dreams if they succeeded in capturing the princess. Their mission was clear. Abduct Layla and bring her to the depths of the forest, where she could be disposed of without anyone knowing. With her orders given, Isha stood in the shadows, her eyes glinting with malicious satisfaction. The time for subtlety was over. The kingdom would soon fall under her control, and Princess Layla's interference would be nothing more than a memory. Princess Layla's capture. Princess Layla, ever watchful of the changes in the palace, had been growing more suspicious of Lady Isha's intentions. She had tried to warn her father, but the king's mind was clouded, and he refused to listen. Day by day, she could see the life draining from him, his strength diminishing with each passing moment. And now, with the prophecy burning in her mind, Layla knew she could not wait any longer. She had to confront Isha. But she was not prepared for what happened next. One evening, as she took her usual walk through the palace gardens, a group of mercenaries appeared out of nowhere, surrounding her with blades drawn. They were quick, their movements practiced. Before Layla could draw her sword or cry for help, they overwhelmed her, binding her hands and pulling her toward a waiting horse. "Let me go." Layla struggled, her voice filled with defiance. "What is this madness?" One of the mercenaries, a burly man with a cruel smile, sneered. "Your mother warned us that you might be trouble, princess. But no one warned you, did they?" He laughed, and his grip on her tightened. Another mercenary, a woman with a scar across her face, glared at Layla. "The queen says you're a threat to her reign. And we've been paid to make sure that threat disappears." The words hit Layla like a blow to the chest. The queen. She realized too late that Lady Isha had orchestrated this. She had been betrayed by the very woman her father had trusted. As they rode through the darkening forest, Layla struggled against her captors, but the ropes were tight, and the mercenaries were too strong. The dense trees loomed overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into eternity. The deeper they rode into the woods, the more Layla realized the danger she was in. This was no simple kidnapping, this was a trap meant to end her life. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to plan her escape. She had faced danger before, but never like this. Her enemies were too close, and she could feel their malice hanging in the air. Suddenly, she heard the sound of galloping hoofs in the distance, and a flicker of hope sparked within her. Perhaps someone had noticed her disappearance, perhaps help was on the way. But the mercenaries were not concerned. They merely laughed as they rode deeper into the forest, confident that Layla's fate was sealed. As the night grew darker, the sounds of the forest seemed to close in on her. Layla's mind raced, but she refused to give up. "I will survive this," she thought. "I will fight until my last breath." No one will take my kingdom from me. But the forest was vast, and her fate was becoming more uncertain with each passing moment. The trap was set, and she was walking right into it. A hero's intervention. The dense forest seemed to close in on Princess Layla, the sounds of her captor's laughter growing louder as they rode deeper into the wild. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back, and despite her struggle, she couldn't free herself. The forest, once a place of beauty, now felt like a suffocating maze. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced. This cannot be the end, she thought desperately. I must escape. I cannot die like this. Just as she felt the cold grip of fear closing around her, the sudden sound of galloping hoofs echoed through the trees, followed by a sharp, commanding voice. Let her go, the voice called out, filled with power and authority. The mercenaries paused, their faces twisting in confusion and alarm. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, and clad in the armor of a hunter. His eyes were sharp and determined, his longbow strong and ready. His presence alone seemed to silence the forest, and the mercenaries froze, sensing something formidable. The man was none other than Kale, the legendary protector of Zonda. Known far and wide for his skill in hunting, his uncanny ability to track and protect, and his unbreakable sense of honor, Kale had long been a protector of the kingdom, a warrior who kept the kingdom safe from the dangers lurking in the wilderness. With a swift movement, Kale released an arrow that struck one of the mercenaries in the chest, dropping him in an instant. The others drew their swords in panic, but Kale moved like a shadow, fast and precise. In a matter of moments, the remaining mercenaries were disarmed, their weapons scattered on the ground. You are safe now, Princess, Kale said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. He cut through the ropes binding her hands and helped her to her feet. Layla stood tall, though the shock of her near-death experience was still heavy in her heart. Thank you, Kale. But why are you here? How did you know? Kale's gaze was unwavering. I have watched over this kingdom for years, Princess. I knew something was wrong when I saw the shadows creep into your father's palace. Isha's evil has spread far too wide, and I have vowed to protect the true heir to Zonda. Layla's eyes widened. You knew? You knew about her? Kale nodded grimly. Yes. I've been tracking the dark magic that has seeped into this kingdom for months. Lady Isha's power is far greater than she lets on, and she has used it to deceive your father. But now, the time has come to stop her. The journey to safety. With the mercenaries defeated and her hands free, Layla took a deep breath, but the danger was far from over. Isha would not let her go easily, and Layla knew she had to reach the river of life to stand a chance against the Red Queen's dark magic. Kale led her deeper into the forest, moving with the precision of a hunter. He explained the journey ahead. We must reach the river of life, Princess. It is said to have the power to strengthen those who seek it with a pure heart. Only by drawing upon its power can you stand against Isha. Layla nodded, determination burning in her eyes. I will do whatever it takes. I will save my father, and I will defeat Isha. Her thoughts turned to her father, still trapped in Isha's poison. She had to hurry. As they made their way deeper into the forest, the terrain grew more treacherous. Thick vines wrapped around trees like living serpents, and the forest was dark, the canopy above blocking out much of the sunlight. Kale, however, moved with ease, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for danger. Layla followed closely behind, her mind racing with plans and thoughts of how she could stop Isha. The river of life, she had heard in stories, was a mystical place. Only those who were worthy could find it. I must be worthy, she thought. For Zonda. For my people. The hidden protector. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they arrived at a clearing. The air seemed thick with an ancient energy, and the very ground beneath their feet felt alive. The trees here were older, their trunks gnawed and twisted with time. It was in this clearing that Layla felt the first true stirrings of magic. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them. A tall, ethereal being, cloaked in shimmering light, with eyes that glowed with an inner fire. The figure's voice echoed through the air, carrying the weight of centuries. "I am the guardian of Xander," the figure said, its voice a deep, resonating sound, like the wind passing through the trees. "You seek the river of life, but the path you walk is fraught with peril. To reach it, you must first prove your worth." Layla stood still, her heart pounding. She had heard legends of the Guardian, a spirit who protected the land and its ancient powers. She was in the presence of something much greater than herself. The Guardian's eyes fixed on Layla, and the air around them grew heavy with expectation. "You are brave, princess, but bravery alone will not see you through this trial. You must prove your resolve. The river of life does not offer its power freely, it chooses only those with the strength to face the darkness within themselves." Kale stepped forward, his expression grim. "What must we do?" The Guardian raised a hand, and the trees around them seemed to whisper in the wind. "You must face your deepest fears, princess. Only when you confront the darkness within your own heart can you hope to wield the power of the river. Fail, and you will be lost." Layla felt a chill run through her, but there was no turning back. She nodded resolutely. "I will face whatever trials await me. I will not fail." The Guardian's eyes softened, a flicker of approval in their depths. "Then proceed, princess. The river of life awaits you, but you must pass through the trials of the forest first." With that, the Guardian faded into the mist, leaving Layla and Kale to face the trials ahead. Isha's deception. Back at the palace, the once great kingdom of Xander was in the grip of despair. King Zurek, weakened by poison and the loss of his vitality, sat silently on his throne. His once powerful frame had withered, and the light that once burned in his eyes had dimmed. The people, sensing the king's decline, began to whisper in hushed tones about his strange behavior and the growing cruelty of the queen. Lady Isha's rule had become nothing less than a reign of terror. She used her magic to manipulate the minds of the nobles and took full control over the kingdom's wealth and resources. Her demands grew harsher with each passing day. The farmers, once free to cultivate their land, were now forced to give half of their crops to the palace. The merchants were ordered to send all their wealth to the queen, leaving the kingdom's people struggling to survive. Isha's greed was insatiable, and her dark power continued to grow. With each passing day, she drained more life force from the villagers, using their suffering to fuel her own strength. And all the while, King Zurek remained too weak to see the truth. Isha had him wrapped in a spell of illusion, preventing him from understanding the full extent of her treachery. As the kingdom's people grew restless under her rule, whispers of rebellion began to rise. But Isha, ever calculating, was prepared for this. She used her dark magic to silence any opposition, ensuring that no one could rise against her. The once proud kingdom was now a shell of what it had been, and Lady Isha's grip on the throne seemed unshakable. Layla's transformation. Meanwhile, deep in the heart of the ancient forest, Princess Layla had faced her trials and emerged stronger than ever before. The river of life had granted her the strength she needed to stand against the darkness that threatened to consume her kingdom. As she stood at its banks, the power of the river coursed through her, filling her with an energy that was as ancient as the land itself. Her senses heightened, and she felt her connection to the land of Xander grow stronger. She could hear the whispers of the wind through the trees, the murmurs of the earth beneath her feet. The river of life had awakened something within her, a power she had never known she possessed. Kale, ever watchful, observed the transformation with a mixture of awe and respect. "The river has given you strength beyond measure, princess. You are ready to face Isha." But Layla knew that strength alone would not be enough. There was something more she needed, something to give her the power to destroy Isha's dark magic. The Heartstone, she said, her voice steady with newfound confidence. It is said to be the key to defeating Isha, isn't it? Kale nodded. Yes, the Heartstone is an ancient relic, hidden deep within the heart of the kingdom. It holds the power to destroy even the darkest magic, but it is not easy to obtain. Many have sought it, but few have returned. Layla's resolve hardened. We must find it. Without it, I cannot hope to defeat Isha. With Kale by her side, Layla set off to find the Heartstone, knowing that it was the only weapon capable of breaking Isha's hold on the throne of Xandar. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was determined to see it through. The confrontation. After days of searching, Layla and Kale finally found the Heartstone, an ancient gem hidden deep within the ruins of an old temple, guarded by magic and time. With the Heartstone in hand, Layla felt the full weight of her responsibility. The time had come to return to the palace and confront Isha. As they approached the palace, the atmosphere grew heavy with tension. The kingdom, once full of life and prosperity, now seemed like a dark, oppressive place. The people moved about in fear, their eyes downcast, afraid to speak against the queen. But they knew that Layla had returned, and with her came hope. Layla stood at the gate of the palace, her heart filled with a mixture of anger, fear, and determination. She had seen the damage Isha had done to her people, and she would not let it continue. The time for deception was over. It was time for the final battle. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. You are not alone, princess. Together, we will end this. With a deep breath, Layla entered the palace. The grand halls were eerily silent, the usual bustling of the palace staff replaced by a heavy, oppressive quiet. She moved through the corridors with Kale at her side, her mind focused on one thing, the final confrontation with Lady Isha. At last, they reached the throne room, where Isha awaited them, seated on the throne with an air of cold superiority. The Red Queen's beauty was still undeniable, but her eyes glowed with a darkness that was almost palpable. Her magic crackled in the air, a constant reminder of the evil that she had wrought upon the kingdom. Oh, Princess Layla, Isha said, her voice smooth and mocking. I wondered when you would return. You think you can defeat me? You think you can take what is mine? Layla stepped forward, her hand resting on the Heartstone, which pulsed with ancient energy. I don't think I can defeat you. I know I can. Isha's lips curled into a sinister smile. You are a fool. You have no idea what you are up against. I have controlled this kingdom for far too long. No one, not even you, can take that from me. The final battle began. Isha's dark magic lashed out at Layla, a wave of shadow that sought to consume her. But Layla was ready. She held the Heartstone aloft, its power shimmering in the air, and she summoned the strength of the river of life within her. The Heartstone responded, its light clashing with Isha's darkness. The air crackled with energy as the two women clashed, their magic colliding in a fierce battle of wills. Isha's power was immense, but Layla's newfound strength was greater. The Heartstone pulsed with an energy that seemed to push back against Isha's magic, weakening her with every passing moment. Your reign ends now, Isha. Layla cried, her voice filled with the power of the river, the Heartstone, and her unshakable will. With a final, devastating blow, Layla unleashed the full power of the Heartstone, and Isha's dark magic shattered. The Red Queen let out a scream of rage as her true form was revealed, her once beautiful appearance dissolving into a monstrous, twisted figure. Isha fell to her knees, her power fading away. No, this cannot be, she hissed, but her voice faltered as the last of her strength evaporated. With one final, powerful surge of energy, Layla destroyed the darkness that had plagued Xandar. The kingdom was free, the clash of powers. The throne room of Xandar was filled with a thick, oppressive air as Layla and Isha stood facing each other. The palace, once a symbol of peace and prosperity, now felt like a battleground between light and darkness. The walls seemed to tremble with the force of the magic crackling between the two women. Layla held the hearthstone aloft, its radiant light shining through the darkness that surrounded them. The air around her buzzed with energy, the power of the river of life coursing through her veins. Isha, standing across from her, raised her hands, and dark shadows curled around her fingers, crackling with raw, malevolent magic. "You think you can defeat me, princess?" Isha sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "I have ruled Xander for far too long. You are nothing but a child in the face of my power." Layla's gaze never wavered. "You may have controlled this kingdom through fear and lies, but your reign ends tonight." With a fierce cry, Isha launched a wave of dark energy at Layla, a shadowy storm of power that threatened to overwhelm her. The force of the magic was immense, and for a moment, Layla faltered, her breath catching in her chest. The darkness pressed in, suffocating her, but then she gripped the hearthstone tighter, drawing upon its power and the strength of the river of life within her. The hearthstone pulsed with a brilliant light, pushing back the shadows that surrounded her. Layla raised it high, calling upon the magic of the river, and a beam of pure energy shot out from the gem, colliding with Isha's dark magic in a burst of light and shadow. The two forces collided with such power that the very walls of the palace trembled, the ground beneath their feet cracking and splintering. Isha shrieked in fury as the hearthstone's light continued to push back her darkness. Her form flickered, her illusion shattering as the true extent of her power began to unravel. For the first time in centuries, the Wraith Queen's true form began to emerge, her decayed, monstrous figure slowly replacing the beautiful facade she had carefully crafted. Her once glowing eyes turned into hollow pits of darkness, and her skin, once smooth and alluring, began to peel away, revealing the horrific creature beneath. With a final, devastating surge of energy, Layla unleashed the full power of the hearthstone, and Isha's magic collapsed entirely. The Wraith Queen let out a scream of rage and desperation, but the magic that had kept her alive for centuries was no longer enough to save her. Her true form, hideous and rotten, was now exposed for all to see. The transformation of the Queen. The moment Isha's illusion shattered, the court gasped in horror. The courtiers, the soldiers, and the people who had gathered in the palace to witness the end of the battle recoiled as Isha's true nature was revealed. Her once beautiful face had become a grotesque mask of decay, her lips twisted in an eternal snarl, and her body sagged under the weight of her centuries of dark magic. "Do you see now, Xander?" Isha's voice was a rasp, her dark power fading with each passing second. "I have been your queen, your ruler, for so long, and yet you never truly saw me for what I am." The once strong and proud kingdom was now free from her control, the truth laid bare for all to witness. Her magic, her power, her manipulation of the king's mind, all of it had been undone in an instant. Layla stepped forward, her eyes hard with determination. "You have no power here anymore, Isha. Xander belongs to the people, not to you." With that, she summoned the hearthstone's energy one final time, and a burst of light engulfed the Wraith Queen. Her monstrous form screamed, her body disintegrating into dust as the last remnants of her dark magic were erased from the world. As the light faded, Isha was gone, nothing but a memory of the darkness that had once ruled the kingdom. The people of Xander, who had feared the queen for so long, now stood in awe of the woman who had freed them. The kingdom's restoration. With Isha's defeat, the spell that had cast a shadow over Xander was broken. King Zorek, still weak from the poison, slowly began to stir, his senses returning as the magic that had clouded his mind faded. His eyes opened, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he saw the truth of the kingdom and his people. Layla rushed to his side, her heart filled with relief. "Father, you're free." King Zorek, his eyes filled with tears, looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "I am so sorry, my child. I could not see it, But you have saved us all. The people of Zanda, once fearful and oppressed, now erupted in joyous celebration. The kingdom was free, and the light of hope returned to their lives. The city, once dark and silent, now hummed with the sounds of joy and relief. Layla's heart swelled with pride as she looked out over her kingdom. The people cheered her name, their voices filled with gratitude. She had not only saved Zanda from the Red Queen's reign but had restored the kingdom to its rightful place. A new dawn. The following days were filled with rebuilding and healing. With the Red Queen's dark influence gone, the kingdom began to thrive once more. The farmers returned to their fields, the merchants to their trades, and the people of Zanda rejoiced in the return of their prosperity. King Zorek, now fully recovered, stood beside his daughter as they addressed the people of Zanda. Today, we celebrate not just the defeat of darkness, but the rise of a new hope for our kingdom, he said, his voice strong once more. Layla, my daughter, you have proven yourself to be the true heir to Zanda. You are the light that will guide us forward. The elders, who had watched in silence as the battle unfolded, stepped forward and placed the royal crown upon Layla's head. By the laws of our ancestors, we crown you, Layla, the true queen of Zanda, they declared, their voices filled with reverence. Layla stood tall, the weight of the crown settling upon her brow. The people cheered, their voices rising in a chorus of celebration. The kingdom, once torn apart by darkness, was now whole again, and under Queen Layla's rule, it would flourish once more. As the sun set over the kingdom, casting a golden glow over the land, Layla looked out over the horizon. She had faced darkness and emerged victorious. The future of Zanda was now in her hands, and she would rule with wisdom, strength, and compassion. A new dawn had arrived for Zanda, and under Queen Layla's reign, the kingdom would know peace and prosperity for generations to come.